It is great to have all of you here with us today. And thanks to BYUMS Ghana for the opportunity to talk about topics that are very dear to my heart. And as you can imagine, it's also a very challenging one. Day in, day out, we make ethical decisions in our personal and professional lives. Personal ethics are individual standards of behavior. It is what people see as right or wrong. And we use these standards to make moral judgments. At the workplace, on the other hand, is a code of ethics or code of conduct. In a way, it sets the tone that is expected from our employees. But workplace ethics is more than just a set of rules or guidelines. It is the foundation of trust. It is respect, and it's integrity, which is an imperative for every successful organization. What am I trying to say here? Workplace ethics starts with us. It is the choices that we make, be it small or big, which must be consistent with ethical principles. And that defines the character of us and ultimately the character of our workplace. When we talk about ethics, it is about the honesty in our dealings. It is about the transparency in our actions. And it's also about accountability for the decisions that we make. Essentially, it is about doing what is right when no one is watching. As I navigate through this presentation, I will give you examples of some of the investigations that I have been involved with to enable us drive home lapses in ethical decision-making that can occur at the workplace. So let's get started. Lapses in ethical decisions. We start with conflict of interest. Conflict of interest occurs when you find yourself in a situation where personal interests might conflict with your professional duties. Like I said, I'm going to start with examples. I was involved in an investigation where an employee was working as a full-time employee of the company and a part-time employee with one of the vendors of the same company. Purchases from vendors were promptly paid to this particular vendor, even though there was a department policy that says that you should only have 2 weeks turnaround time for payment of invoices. Now, you would ask, what is the conflict here? The conflict here is the fact that this person pays the said vendor promptly because of his interests. It is because he knows that when this vendor gets his money or her money, he would also promptly pay it. What is the conflict in the professional duties? It is the violation of the company policy. Now, just don't look at it in terms of his interests, but also think about the injustice or the discrimination against the other vendors. That is where we have to be mindful of the type of decisions that we make. Now let's go to workplace theft. This occurs when employees take property of the employer without consent and with the intent to permanently deprive the employer of his property. Again, I'm going to give an example. A vendor had come to the accounts department, very angry. Why? Because he had supplied items and was expecting payment. The payment did not come for 6 good months. After several calls to the said manager, nothing happened. He came to the company to actually meet the said manager. Guess what? That did not yield anything. And so the reason why he had to come to the company itself. Well, this also came as a surprise to the accounts department because they had given the money to the said manager to pay the vendor. Now, does anyone here think that this manager will still have a job after what has happened? Okay, well, the answer is very obvious, as I can see Bright shaking his head. Then we talk about questionable use of company resources. Now, this is a bit of a gray area, but I don't see it as a gray area because it depends on your ethical orientation. Why do I say that? We have employees that take a pen, they might take a pen, they might take a notepad home because they think, oh, what is a pen? Oh, it's not a big deal. But that it's not good judgment. The pen is of no value, but you are looking at the principle behind it. You also have employees that sit at the premises of the employer, use the company computer, use the company network to look for jobs. We have employees that use cell phones that are given to them for work purposes. What do? They used to chat or they used to do their own business. Now, the ultimate example that I would give on this one is that there was an employee that was not giving or submitting his reports on time. So the manager became alarmed. Which prompted the manager to actually do what? Initiate an investigation. It turned out that this employee gave his company phone, his company computer to his wife, who was actually studying at the university in another town. Ethical decision? Absolutely not. Now, we go to harassment. Harassment is an unwelcome conduct. It could be verbal, it could be physical, it could be insults, it could be comments, it could be jokes. I recently had a meeting with a group of employees about employee relations issues in their department. One of the girls raised her hand and said that management needs to talk to their male counterparts because they are in the habit of touching them in a jovial way, which she doesn't feel comfortable with. To my surprise, there was a rebuttal. A male employee responded by saying that the ladies should close their doors when changing into their official uniforms. And everybody was laughing. While all of them were, everybody was laughing. But while everybody saw it as a joke, to be honest with you, I was taken aback. I was very concerned about the situation I found myself. I referred these employees back to company policies on harassment. And I plan to give a training on harassment next month, next year actually, because this happens to be a busy season for them. Now we talk about confidentiality. Breach of confidentiality occurs when there is an unauthorized access, use, or disclosure of confidential information. Well, confidential information. I was involved in an investigation again into a situation which an employee had gone to the accountant to ask for the name on a check that the MD had signed for someone. Luckily, the accountant made an ethical decision by not revealing the name on the check. But he didn't stop there. He blew the whistle by going to report the incident to the managing director. Now, let's talk about how to mitigate these lapses. There is no way we can say that we can erase on ethical decisions at the workplace. It is not going to happen because it's a human institution. But then we can actually minimize it. And how do we minimize that? We can minimize it by analyzing the situation. I would use the accountant's actions as an example. He analyzed the situation and realized that the request for the name on the check was done in bad faith. Hence, his decision not to give the name out. Try to ask questions when you are confronted with ethical decisions. If the organization has hotline for whistleblowers, please use them. Refer to company policies and procedures for guidelines. And also take advantage of ethical trainings as different scenarios and cases may be utilized. And when there is an investigation, please be truthful and forthcoming during the investigation. To borrow a line from our police service on safety, if you see something, please say something. Now, what do you do when you are asked to do something that feels unethical? You have to first recognize what the issue is. And how do you do that? You have to carefully examine the dilemma and identify the ethical problem. And I think that's with this part, it's about using good judgment. Secondly, you have to seek clarity. Ask questions instead of making assumptions and accusations, because people's integrity is at stake. So you just don't jump into conclusions when you think that something doesn't feel right. You do not want to be the person that makes issues out of nothing. So it is important to seek clarity when you are in doubt. Seek advice. That's why you have human resources. That is why you also have your supervisors. So again, when there are issues, you have to consult your supervisors or the HR department. If necessary, you escalate the situation, which is what we saw with the accountant. And lastly, which is the part that I like as an HR professional, it's important that you document things. Document the advice that you gave and your findings to demonstrate that you tried to do something that is right. Documentation is key. Now, the last one is the extreme. And I hope nobody finds himself or herself in that situation. When you feel that what you are asked to do would tarnish your good name, then you may be prepared to walk away. As we say in our local palace, a good name is better than riches. It's as simple as that. You cannot continue to be in an environment where you don't feel right, where you think that it will tarnish your good reputation or hard-earned reputation. Now, these things, they don't come, they just don't appear from the blue. They are always red flags. So let me talk about some of the red flags that we see. Lack of transparency. Now, you remember the example I gave about the check? Now, it turned out during the investigation that the employees went to the accountant to inquire about the name on the check because they suspected that one of their colleagues was given a bonus for work that they collectively did. And for that matter, they thought that they were being shortchanged, which is why they went to do that. And so you agree with me that if that company or if that organization was that transparent, they will not give room. It will not give room for these people to go fishing for something like that. So lack of transparency can open these type of actions. Now, pressure to make a quick decision. Back to the same example that I gave. When the employee first went to the accountant, He went by himself, thinking he could persuade the accountant to give the name out. When he did not succeed, he went back, was able to convince his head of department, who then went back with him to the accountant. Now he needed reinforcement. But thank God for good ethical decision. And I am very proud of the accountant. He did not give the name out in spite of the pressure and in spite of the reinforcement. Now, ignoring company policies and procedures. You would agree with me that the example that I gave on the harassment has to do with these people not following company policy. Because if they were following company policy and not ignoring it, they would have known that it is not right to just keep touching anybody anyhow, or even exposing yourself just because they are touching you. See, so it goes both ways. Now, the fourth one is conflict of interest, which I've already touched on. So if you were following the example I gave about the full-time employee that also had the part-time job, you would understand what it means to have conflict. Okay, then the last one I would talk about is negative consequences for speaking up. What does that mean? Well, this occurs when the company has a culture of retaliation, intimidation, victimization of people who speak up. When you don't allow people to speak up, then people are bound to make unethical decisions. So, in conclusion, workplace ethics, ethical decision-making should not be seen as an event, but rather a journey. It should be a continuous process of self-reflection, learning, and improvement. We should all commit to upholding the highest ethical standards in our decision-making in the workplace, not just for the sake of compliance or checking boxes, but because it is the right thing to do. When we uphold these standards, we can create workplaces that we can all be proud of, where trust, respect, integrity becomes second nature in our professional lives. Now, thank you for listening.